Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.
Hey look everyone, it's Roid Rage Perry the Platypus, yay! Welcome to Slap City, a weird town that's difficult to navigate, and where people love to fight. I mean, it has its own coliseum. And, well, more obviously, it has Slap in the title. It's got a volcano too. Such amenities. No wonder our cast of characters came here to visit. It's the place to be. Nearly killed. By spikes, balloons, or bees. Or maybe even during combat. First things first, yes, it's a platform fighting game. Hopefully enough of them exist nowadays that you can't immediately brand them smash clones. Opponents have to be knocked off of the screen, and the more damage they've received, the more impactful your hits are. Stay on land and on screen and you'll win. The game even uses Nintendo's strategy of using the developing company's IPs to come up with the character roster, enemies, and stages. So instead of Nintendo characters, we see Ludosity characters. Sure, Nintendo has come up with a great many wonderful and weird characters, but Ludosity is a fair bit of weirdness to draw upon as well. They do well on this front in spite of them being a younger company with fewer IPs, and thus fewer selectable characters and combat stages. But they still managed to squeeze out a persona for their game. A deranged and worthwhile one. The characters have vastly different looks. Except for Fralin and Princess Remedy, but they come from the same series. I'm guessing they're part of the same group or order or faction. And all of them apart from Fralin have story modes, with their own unique storylines. Beautifully absurd storylines. There are genuinely funny moments, usually involving Business Casual Man, the senior sausage of sales and suspenders. All these characters are just barreling through the town, and nothing will keep them from their end goals. Not even logic. And while the strategy of throwing any possible justification at the characters as to why they would continue on their quests feels forced and tacked on in other games, here it feels on brand and adds to the humor. They quest in search of money, treasure, revenge, peace and serenity. And all the other playable characters' motives change as necessary to make your storyline work. Fast, great fun that doesn't really take itself seriously. Or seriously at all. Okay, perhaps that's not fair. If anything, it seems like they're trying to be serious about being facetious. While not as well known, these characters are established. And that adds a bit of heft. A very strange epicness if you're familiar with Ludosity. Even though these games that the characters come from are only mentioned in a referential humorous sort of way. Now let's move on to content. As mentioned, there are story modes to play, which involve the expected fighting stages, where you square off against one or more enemies. Traditional. But in between those levels are also platforming stages, where you use the same movement and combat mechanics as in the fighting stages, but to platform and defeat weaker enemies. And how is it as a platformer? Pretty okay. It's kind of hard to explain. In some ways it feels very loose. You can flow through the air. You have a great amount of air mobility, because that's a staple of platform fighting games, having methods of getting back on the arena floor. And when you use the momentum, you go about quite quickly. But in other ways it feels quite rigid. As you're flowing through the air, your descent can feel quite slow. It's probably designed that way to give you more time to scope out the situation, figure out what to do, and also when you're not using the momentum, in general the movement feels quite slow and lumbering. You know, it doesn't feel like the best kind of system to use for precision. And sometimes you can just get stuck in a sort of damage loop. So it takes some getting used to. But once you do, it gets quite easy. You start moving better with the character. And you realize the true purpose of these platforming levels. Because they are pretty much the same for all characters. Except for a few differences here and there. Usually in situations where you have to utilize the character's special movement or attack functions. And since there are a great many differences between the characters, these areas can look quite different from each other. Thus the platforming stages are actually instructional levels. to train you in the nuances of the character. When it comes to advanced techniques of movement and attack, there will always be moments where you have to approach a situation differently because of your character and their skill set. Most notably Ultra Fishbun 3000, who is probably the least mobile character of them all. Completing the death maze with him is quite the chore. It can get boring doing the same levels over and over again with different characters. But in all fairness, I found it fun enough that I did it with 6 out of 8 of them. At least the fighting stages are usually different and against different characters, with the story being the incentive to carry on. Not the only incentive, mind you. You can replay the story mode levels with different characters in order to find collectibles. Unfortunately, they're located in the same places, but you may have to approach them differently in order to collect them, in the way mentioned. And while the pickups may be in the same place, each one represents a unique item. Usually color variants of skins, and you can unlock for different stages the ability to use different tracks other than the music designed for that arena. Plus you can find some bonus content such as weird interviews of the characters, in-depth move lists. I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, but I think the fighting mechanics on this game may be brilliant and quite balanced, if unfortunately there aren't that many characters. Also, you can unlock some history about this character in the Ludosity gaming universe, in what game they appear and what they were doing in those particular games. I liked reading those things, but most of you probably won't. Not everyone is as into gaming history as I am, especially considering that Ludosity is lesser known. The game also, perhaps unsurprisingly, has an arcade mode, and it's fairly easy on normal difficulty mode. But on higher difficulty modes it gets rather taxing. The arcade modes are made up almost exclusively of fighting stages, as is tradition, with 2 fun bonus levels thrown in. Usually the matchups and stage you fight on are randomized, you progress in stages, and the position of those bonus levels, as well as the amount of opponents for the stage, are fixed. And once you complete the arcade mode, you get a score and a weird ending narration. Also, you can fight battles and play Slap Ball as same-screen multiplayer. But it isn't that controller flexible. It seems to indicate that it is, but I've tried some less official types of controller, and they didn't seem to work. So I comboed up my Xbox controller and keyboard. But my less official types of controller are quite old, maybe that's the reason? Nice. May remind some of you of Tekken Volleyball. But how are the combat mechanics? Very tight and smooth. And as mentioned, if you have the skills, potentially very complex. But those of us with less skill in fighting games will have fun as well, because most attacks just require pressing a direction and a button at the same time. Very easy to get to grips with as long as you remember what your character can do. As said, they can behave quite differently in terms of power, maneuverability, and techniques. I do believe that they managed to differentiate between the 9 characters beautifully. How about the visuals? I like them. The characters sort of have a Plasticene quality. Smooth and angular, and very low texture. Just look at this collection of tubes. The visuals aren't for everyone. I mean, they do look a bit lifeless. As for the stages themselves, well, there are a lot of them. Some look downright great, while others look a bit uninspired. But maybe that's the fault of the game the stage is based on. But still, I mean, I'm a Ludosity fan, but I don't know the game they're referencing here. But for the most part, the stages are good and varied. Maybe not the most diverse in terms of platform structure and size. I guess I can't help but compare it to Smash. Musically, it's good and varied as well. I love the surf rock intro. As well as this piece of funk. This game is a bawdy, brilliant thing. I played for about 17 hours, completing 6 out of 8 of the story modes, and maybe as many normal difficulty arcade modes. Maybe a bit of versus battling for fun. but very little. I've yet to truly stretch its legs with friends, and I believe all in all it's not bad in terms of length. But warning, I advise you to carefully think and consider over whether this game is for you. Would you truly get a similar amount of length out of this game? Especially considering the repetitive nature of the story mode platform levels. It is sort of cheap on Steam. Full price it's only 130 Rand, and I've seen it go for 40 Rand 30 on sale. But unfortunately there was no sale price during the Steam Summer Sale 2022. But if you can wait and snap it up once it's on sale again, at that price or lower, then it delivers some good value for money, as it was 2 Rand 38 per hour of gameplay for me. I just don't know when that sale will come along again. The game takes up 2,307 megabytes on the hard drive, so the download isn't the easiest, but it's okay. It doesn't really work on the Warhorse though. I mean, it will play, but it will lag a lot. And the situation doesn't even improve when you lower the resolution or quality. Arguably unplayable in this state, for a fighting game. Sure, younger me may have tried to tough it out, but with a lot of frustration. You're going to need something stronger than the Warhorse to play it. But stereotypically, at the very least, it's okay for kids. Punching and spikes, but no blood. The game has personality in spades, albeit a very weird one based on lesser known characters. The game has good music, quite varied, and the game itself is also varied and well-rounded. Fighting stages, story, platforming stages, slap, ball. At the very least, they pack more into it than a fighting game has to have. It has funny dialogue and story mode, utterly silly to its core, and the fighting mechanics are quite tight. Easy to play, hard to master and all that, but in all fairness, this isn't my area of expertise. I know very little of combos or balance, but I believe they did a very good job for their small roster. Good for stupid fun as well as getting serious. On the maybe side, while the dialogue is funny, the story and plot itself is more like a functional justification and excuse for the action, there to make sure their campaign template is still intact. But the gags are good, it's ridiculous, done well. Also, the visuals are kind of take 'em or leave 'em. I could take 'em. The stages are varied, and some of them look downright beautiful. But some of them look quite plain and uninspired, or at the very least aren't that varied in terms of size and platform structure. Also, the characters can look a bit lifeless, and when you view their models up close, they have a odd Plasticene quality. But I actually like that. Decide for yourself what the visuals qualify as. Also, no voice acting, so you have to read all of that story. As for cons, it's really repetitive to replay the platforming levels when playing a different character's story mode. Plus, some of the less mobile characters make the platforming stages very difficult. Ultra Fishbun especially. I mean, playing with them was infuriating. This is a great game, but sure, a lot of platform fighters have come out recently. I mean, even Ludosity itself chose to co-develop Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. Then you have Brawlhalla, Multiverse, Smash, and lesser-known titles, but I maintain this is a very worthwhile contender. Not in terms of roster size, I wouldn't be surprised if it has the smallest character roster in that list. But it's cheap when it's on sale, it's tight, it's weird. Come on, play it, and experience the glory of playing as Fred, a diamond in the skin.
Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.